Hey, this is Warren Redlich. Thank you for watching. I'm at the Daily Live. This is the topic I couldn't talk about on YouTube freely. I figure we have this conversation on the Daily Live platform, and maybe I'll invite people from YouTube to come see it. I'm here with Naor and Eytan, who are, I believe, in Israel. They're known as the Nice Jewish Boys. Do I have that right?
Two nice Jewish boys.
Two Nice Jewish Boys, and you have a YouTube channel.
We have a podcast called Two Nice Jewish Boys, a YouTube channel also, but we're also on Spotify and everywhere you can get a podcast.
Awesome. So the basic story here is I saw you guys talk about Israel, the conflict with the Arabs or Palestinians or however we're going to refer to it. And I just for the audience to understand this, many people who see this would probably view this as one-sided, as biased. And I'm okay with that just right off the bat. I'm Jewish. I was raised Jewish. I have a lot of friends who are Israelis. I was raised to believe that Israel's in the right and that the Arabs are in the wrong. And I'm not saying that it's perfectly true, but I've generally seen it that way. My impression from what I saw you guys do was that we're probably roughly on the same page, but you guys know a lot more about it than I do. And I'm hoping after this conversation to have a conversation with somebody who might be on a different side of this story. And hopefully this conversation will help me understand and help the audience understand things better. So there's this conflict on this land that I think of as Israel and other people think of as Palestine. There's a lot of things that are confusing, I think, to a lot of people. There's a lot of stories that are told that might not be accurate. Just today, I had an exchange with a guy who says he was born in that land, and that his family, they had their land stolen from them, whatever. And he said something about the Zionists control the banks. I love this, a lot of classic anti-Semitic lies that he said, well, I'm not talking about Jews, I'm talking about Zionists. Yeah, you're talking about Jews. Sorry. But there's this claim that Israel stole the land from the Palestinians. So let me take one step back. There's this group of people that call themselves Palestinians. And I'm going to reveal my bias right away. I don't even buy the term Palestinian. I think they're Arabs, and I think the term Palestinian was created to create a victim class around the time Israel was created. What's your sense of the notion of there being a Palestinian people as opposed to a group of people who are Arabs who adopted the name Palestinian? I've never seen you guys talk about this. I'm curious what you think about that.
So I'll start off.
And sorry, which one of you is Naor and which one of you is Eytan?
I'm Eytan, and this is Naor.
Great.
I just want to say that about our podcast, The Two Nice Jewish Boys, just so people have a kind of an idea of what it is. We bring on people every week to have kind of an interesting conversation. So just to kind of give an idea of what the podcast is, if people want to tune in. I think regarding your question, the Palestinians, right? The Philistines is an ancient people that lived in the land, and I mean you can go and read the Bible if you want to read about the history of the Philistines. And I think it goes back to one of the revolts. I'm not sure exactly which one. It might have been the Bar Kokhba revolt. Afterwards, the Romans kind of just completely wiped out the land, and then as kind of to rub salt in the wounds of the Jewish people who were living here, they renamed the land Palestine, like the Palestinian area, right? So they renamed it Palestine. So that's where the name goes back to historically. So I don't think it wasn't just kind of invented 70 years ago. But I think you're more or less accurate in the sense that it is being co-opted or hijacked in order to create this national identity. I mean, Yasser Arafat was Egyptian, right? I mean,
yeah.
it is being hijacked.
Tunisian.
I think he was Egyptian, no?
Maybe.
One of his parents was Egyptian, and maybe one of his parents was Tunisian. But either way, it is being hijacked in order to create this national identity that for all intents and purposes doesn't really exist. I mean, there is no long-standing Palestinian national history that goes farther back than 70, 80 years. They are Arab inhabitants of the land that were under British occupation under British rule before 1948, and before that the Ottoman Empire, going all the way back to the early 16th century.
Wasn't Genghis
And-
Khan,
most of
wasn't it
them-
Genghis Khan's at some point? Wasn't-
Yeah, at some point.
No, but
at
most
some
of-
point
most
there
of
was
them-
yeah.
Most of them weren't here. Most of them came late 19th century.
Right. Isn't it also, that's what I was going to ask, isn't it also true that the people who are now call themselves Palestinians were actually people, I mean, to some extent, the people who were on, the Arab people who were on the land were migratory, and to some extent, the people who are calling themselves Palestinians now came from other parts of the Arab world to live in that land?
I mean, that's a very prominent theory. You know, it's all there are facts, there were books written about that, but essentially, when Jews started to come here, and the land prospered, first under the Turks and later under the British from 1917, after the First World War, where Palestine was conquered by the Brits. That attracted loads of Arabs from the neighbor countries, which weren't countries. It was all the British mandate. The French ruled some of it, and you could just pack your bags and move. There are books. I think Mark Twain wrote a book in the 19th century describing the land as desolate.
Mm-hmm.
And so until it was can we curse on your show?
Yes.
Okay, it was
It was a shithole country.
a shithole. It was a shithole land. It wasn't a country.
Yeah.
But until 1915,
Yeah.
until Tel Aviv was founded, it was a shithole. And then Jews and Arabs started to come here and prosper. The Jews brought prosperity because they came from civilized cultures.
We're probably going to get in trouble for that one. They came from Western, more wealthy cultures, and they brought methods, technology and methods to make the land more fertile and to make it more productive.
They came from countries that valued education and work and technology and more advanced cultures, essentially.
So there's this story that's told that Israel stole the land from the Palestinians. And my take on that, first of all, was Israel didn't steal the land. The British gave the land. The British had it. There was no Palestinian state. There was no Palestinian government, as far as I know, ever in the history of that land. There was the British government. Before that, there was an Ottoman government. Maybe Genghis Khan ruled it. The Romans ruled it at some point. When was the Palestinian state? As far as I know, it never existed. Am I wrong?
Yeah, there was no. You're absolutely right. There was no Palestinian state, and even today, what people call the Palestinian. Actually, the truth is that the closest thing to a Palestinian state probably was founded in 2005, when Israel pulled out of the unilaterally pulled out of the Gaza Strip. So the Gaza
There's
Strip.
Jordan too.
Yeah, and that's true. That's true. When the mandate in 1917, the original Palestinian mandate, when the British took control of Israel, then they started outlining the Palestinian mandate, and that included modern-day Jordan. And most of the population of Jordan today is actually Palestinian.
And most of the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria had Jordanian citizenship.
Yes.
Right.
So yeah, Jordan is the vast majority of Jordan is Palestinian. It's ruled by the Hashemite kingdom.
Dictator.
Dictator. But they're a minority, like in many Arab countries that are ruled by a minority, when the population is actually a majority of some other people. So the Jordan is majority Palestinian, but Gaza Strip is actually, for all intents and purposes, it's not internationally recognized as a country. But for all intents and purposes, it is Palestine, and that's kind of, I think, one of the points that people tend to ignore. There is a pseudo-Palestinian state. It exists. It's ruled by a despicable terrorist dictatorship that has zero value for life, and the state of the Palestinian state, the condition of the Palestinian state is just abysmal. So
they live like dogs.
It's again not something that can be said on YouTube. So I'm glad we're not doing this on YouTube. But it's true.
It is going to be on YouTube, or maybe not. But is it going to be on YouTube?
Well, you guys got to decide. I mean, you might want to have create a free speech platform, and then do like highlights that you're
right, because you're
sanitized.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, they live like dogs. No, it's not. I don't think it's. They live like dogs.
I just want to follow up on something though. They're not. The Arab world is not uniform. That they're not all the same people. There's groups within the Arab world, and the group that calls themselves Palestinians now is treated badly in all the Arab countries. Roughly, isn't that roughly correct? If they're in Saudi Arabia, they're doing work. They're treated like slave labor. That's my general sense of the so-called Palestinian people, is that they are a part of the Arab world, and for whatever reason, this group, I don't know if they're effectively like gypsies in Europe, they're just not treated well wherever they go.
They are hated. They are hated throughout the Arab world. I think we talked about Jordan, where they live under a cruel dictatorship. But if we talk about Lebanon, for example, I think it's a perfect example. If people want to see apartheid, in Lebanon there's apartheid against the Palestinians. The Palestinians in Lebanon are sub-citizens. They are treated, again, by the Lebanese like animals. They cannot wed anyone. They can't own land. They live in enclosed camps. And that's apartheid, but no one talks about the apartheid in Lebanon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because I already had the sense that they were not treated. I didn't know it was as bad as you just described, but I feel like this is why I feel that, I have no desire to move to Israel. I'm not the classic Zionist, right? I just sort of have in my bones, well, Israel are the good guys. Not to say that Israel's perfect, but Israel roughly the good guys in the story, and the other guys are the bad guys in the story, and that's just the way I was raised, right or wrong. But I look at that and I say, well, I have no desire to move to Israel. If I had it my way, religion would not control land, right? All lands would be free from religious control, and anybody could go anywhere they wanted. But the Arabs who want to kick Israel out, they want to establish religious control of the land. And some of the Israelis are very religiously motivated, and they have religious rules that intrude and control government in Israel. There's no. My ideal solution isn't going to happen. This is kind of where I wanted to ask you, is one of my frustrations when I hear this. It's not really a conversation, right? One person says those are the bad guys, another person says those are the bad guys. I feel like no one has a solution that will ever be accepted. And when I talk to people who are what I will call anti-Israel, say, well, what's your solution to this problem? And ultimately their answer always comes down to Israel has to leave. The Jews have to, they won't admit it, but ultimately the only solution that their side will accept universally is if Israel is eliminated and all the Jews leave. I mean,
it's honest.
Yeah, but it's funny because they've invented a problem that I don't even recognize and then come up with a solution that kicks me out of my home. There is no problem, Warren. There is no problem. We just had an episode with Dan Shiftan, who's an incredible strategic thinker from Israel. I really recommend people listen to it, tune in. But there is no. I mean, he makes the point that if you look at that there are no more kind of like 6-day wars, right? The wars are these long, drawn out, protracted events that you can't really say, okay, this side won or this side won. You have to look after 60, 70 years and ask yourself, where is each side? And if you look at Israel, I mean, man, I just got to describe the view. I mean, we're looking at skyscrapers. We're looking at the Tel Aviv skyline right here. I work in a high-tech company. Naor is a freelance. He works on campaigns and he works in social media. We both make a great living. God willing, my wife is going to give birth in a month. We have great lives. Thank you. We have great lives. And we are prospering. And Israel generally is a wonderful place to live. And you mentioned religious control of the land. There are issues with, church and state in Israel, just as there are in any place. But relative to the current state of the world, Israel is one of the freest places on earth. You can live here and you can exercise any religion you choose. You can practice any religion. You can be from any background. You can
post anything.
Yeah, you could be black. You could be a woman. You could be an Arab. You could be a Jew, and you could live freely here. And it's a wonderful place to live. Whereas the Gaza Strip is a hellhole. I mean, really, I don't think, and I'm not saying it as like it's not a hyperbole.
Right,
it's a hellhole. None of your listeners would want to step foot in there.
But the other side would say that's Israel's fault.
I mean, you could. I don't think that we can get into fault. First of all, we can get into fault, but I'm talking about kind of like you said. Where did this start? We asked basically which side is attacking the other side, right?
And did we steal the land?
Yeah. Well, I mean, but it's funny to be American, right? To live on land like I live near Seminole casinos, right? The Seminoles, the Native Americans, controlled this land, and then Europeans came in, took over all of America, and there's all these people in America who hear I'll call it the woke left cry that the Palestinians are oppressed and the Israelis stole the land. It's like, well, where do you live? You know, we're living on land that was more obviously stolen from the Native Americans by far. I don't know how much you know of American history, but it's blindingly obvious that we stole this land from the Native Americans. We can tell stories about it. Yeah.
Not to mention land that was conquered from sovereign countries.
But again, I'm not sure what stealing. I mean, what does it mean to steal land? But I just want to go back because I do. You were talking about the problem, like there is a problem, the Middle East problem, right? The problem of the Middle East, and what's the solution? And that's what I'm saying is that we could talk about who's right and who's wrong and who stole and who didn't, and we'll get into it. But the idea that there is a problem in the Middle East that needs solving. Israel has already found the solution, which is we are a strong, independent country with a kick-ass military that will, fuck up anybody that tries to mess with us. And we carved out a space on this earth that we live happily on, and there is no problem. I mean, come to Tel Aviv, look around. There is no problem.
I call it the final solution.
Okay, that's a little aggressive.
Little morbid.
It's our final solution.
Yeah. It is our final solution to the Jewish problem, which is to find a peaceful place to live in, and not be annihilated.
And be mighty.
And there's a history there that a lot of people don't recognize. And my ancestors went through this, that Jews were not welcome in Europe. Jews were not treated well around the world. My ancestors came to the United States from Eastern Europe, from Poland and maybe Austria. I'm not sure exactly. Came to the United States and Canada. And what's that saying from the movie? I don't know if you ever saw the movie Stripes. We were kicked out of every decent country in the world. And some group of Jews figured out we need our own space. And they went back to an area that there's a historical claim to this land being a Jewish land. And they established, and like you said, they took basically what was a desert and made a paradise out of it. And I love your point that there isn't a problem. There is a problem. There's a group of people who have decided there's a problem. And that group started, I mean, I guess there's sort of this history thing that 1947 Israel was created, for lack of a better term. What was it like, and none of us were alive then, but what was it like before 1947 when there were Jews and Arabs living in the same land? 48, sorry. What was it like in the 30s or the 20s?
It was bad. We now celebrate 100 years of Arab hostilities and pogroms, essentially, against Jews in Israel. So you had pogroms.
We don't celebrate. We commemorate.
Yeah, commemorate. Sorry.
Pogrom
I'm the Israeli of the team, and Eytan's the American, so you'll have to forgive my
So pogrom is
English
a word
mistakes.
that my audience might not understand. What is a pogrom?
A pogrom is essentially when
in Eastern Europe or in Europe.
Generally, it means when but to be more modern about it, it's when the non-Jews kill and riot and kill the Jews for no apparent reason. And,
so they break store windows,
raise their homes, beat them up, murder them, smash babies' heads against the wall. That's if you Google the Hebron riots in 36, I think. If you go to Wikipedia, you will see that the Arabs in the year 36, and that wasn't the first riot.
29 was one of the biggest ones.
Yeah. Essentially, the Arabs, for no reason, just broke into homes and smashed babies' heads against the walls and murdered women, children, for no reason. And that's decades before a state was even a conceivable thing. Though you had like few 100,000 Jews and a few 100,000 Arabs/Palestinians, whatever, living side by side under the British mandate, and still they violently, savagely attacked us for no reason. So this goes way back before the concept of the State of Israel even existed. There was the Zionist movement, but yeah.
Well, it's sort of like it just seems to me like that one of the stories, this is common in politics everywhere, is you identify a group of people, call them a victim, and then you act as if they're completely innocent and the other side is the oppressor. So the Israelis have become the oppressors and the Arabs have become the victims. The Palestinians, it created this victim class called Palestinians, made them the oppressed. And there's this, I think you mentioned this, and this is something I've said for years. I think you mentioned this in the podcast that I saw. They refer to it as a genocide, that Israel's committing a genocide against the Palestinians. And I was like, I looked this up on my own. I think you came up with something similar, that in 1947, let's say, the Arab population of this land was around 1 million people. And today it's around 5 million people. And you used language very similar to the way I said it. The Jews are really, really bad at this. If you're going to commit a genocide, the population, the targeted population should be reduced, not 5x. It's like one.
Also, I think people don't realize that, okay, you have Israel, the State of Israel, which has citizens, right? We have 9 million citizens, out of who enjoy full equal rights in a thriving democracy. And out of those 9 million, approximately 2 million citizens in Israel, I'm not talking about the territories, are Arab/Palestinians.
And they have representation in the
government.
Yeah,
in the parliament,
right
in the government.
Now, for the first time in history, they actually have 4 sitting members in the coalition, meaning in the ruling power, in the ruling coalition.
They have judges. You know, in the last decade, the Palestinian/Arab Israeli citizens in universities rose 100%. That's okay? In 10 years, 100%. They doubled the number of Arab graduates, the number of Arab doctors in Israel.
We just had the second Supreme Court justice approved now. That's an Arab.
Yeah, and the number of, like, every year, about 30% or 40% of doctors graduating Israeli universities are Arabs. They are 20%. Wait, just this point, they are 20% of the population, yet 40% of the doctors each year are Arab/Palestinians.
Okay, let me just, one thing that I see as a potential distinction, and I might be wrong about this, is there are Arabs who are Muslim and there are Arabs who are Christian. And the people who run Hamas, the people who run Gaza, the people who run the Palestinian Authority, to my understanding, are Arab Muslims. To what extent are the Arab/Palestinians that you're describing, how many of them are Christian as opposed to Muslim?
Most of them are Muslims.
Muslim, yeah. The Palestinian Christians or Arab Christians in Israel are a relative minority.
Okay, so this
they're
group that's got
a very small minority, right?
They're a minority. So we have 2 million.
100,000, 150,000 Christians,
maybe a bit more.
So like less than 10% of that group is Christian.
Yeah,
so,
we're not with the numbers right in front of us, but they're very small minority.
But it is worth mentioning that Arab Palestinian Christians are and were living also in the non-Israeli territories, right, in Judea and Samaria and Gaza, and they were treated horribly. So most of them fled because the Muslim Palestinians treated them even worse than they treat Jews. Yeah, so they fled.
When we talk about this situation, and I think you agree with me, the concept of, I just feel like I'm here in the United States, and I started making jokes about the so-called woke left, because it used to be that, to me, Republicans and Democrats in America I disagreed with both of them about equally. I'm a libertarian, so I don't fit any of the major party platforms. And I feel like the last 5-10 years, the Democratic Party has just gone so far left, and it's a tricky thing because I was raised as a conservative Jew, although it didn't take. I got married, and we raised our children in a Reform synagogue, and Reform synagogues in America are largely Democrat, liberal Democrat. And I feel like as what I see, the left in America turns against Israel and really turns anti-Semitic in a lot of ways. I feel like Reform Jews aren't catching on. Like, hey, these guys are against us. Maybe he should change. And within the congregation, I'm not active in the congregation anymore. But within the congregation, people who are successful in business don't really like the woke left, right? The people who say you don't own the property that the business that you created, all that.
Yeah, I think it's Marxism.
Yeah,
I know it sounds like I'm part of the Red Scare in the 1960s, but it's Marxism, right? I mean, Marxism evolved into different forms, taking on new forms, and it's turned into intersectionality and victimhood. But basically, Marx was saying that everything is a power struggle. There are the powerful and there are the weak, and the weak need to rebel and do a revolution and overtake the powerful. Everything in the world is a hierarchy of power. The weak are the proletariat. They need to seize power from the powerful, right? It's this constant struggle, this constant overturning, and that's exactly what the left has adopted in intersectionality. It's praising the victim. The weak are the victims, and the victims are the ones that are the underdogs, and they need to be protected, and they need to be rooted for against the mighty, powerful warmongers. And that's Israel is now powerful. Israel is now a very, very powerful nation state. We have an extremely powerful army. We have a ton of brain power. And
we're rich also.
We're rich. The Palestinians, like as a nation, we're rich. The Palestinians are very weak, and they're living a very, very poor life. And the left sees that, and in their very, very, very simple-minded paradigm, their input-output function is who's weak, let's support them.
Yeah.
I think it's also worth mentioning that specifically Arabs, Palestinians in the territories, not in Gaza, have it way better than most Arabs in many Arab countries, right? They have it better in not talking about Palestinians in other countries. I'm talking about Arabs in other countries. Like if you look at Arabs in Egypt, Arabs in Syria, Arabs in Lebanon, Arabs in Yemen. So Palestinians in the territories have it better
in the West, in like Judea and Samaria.
In Judea and Samaria, who are occupied and who are in the apartheid air quotes. They have it better than many Arabs in many other states.
Right.
But not to mention the Arabs that live in Israel.
Or in of course. The Arabs who live in Israel enjoy full equal opportunities and rights. They can do anything they want, and many of them do. Many of them thrive. Like if you come to Israel and go to some of their villages, you will see villas. You'll think you're in
Beverly Hills,
in southern Florida.
Are there parts of Israel?
Mar-a-Lago.
Are there parts of Israel where Jews and Arabs live sort of integrated, or does it tend to generally be segregated?
Of course.
That the Arabs live in one place.
Here in Tel Aviv, Jaffa.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, though, I mean, it has to be said. Yes, Jews and Arabs live side by side in Israel in many different cities: Ramle, Lod, Haifa, Yafo, and in many other places. Tveria, right?
No.
And
okay, in many different cities, but I just do want to mention that, I mean, this is getting into a little bit more detail, but last May there was an uprising in Israel in those exact mixed cities. So even there is, I mean, again, like Noah said, Arabs in Israel enjoy equal rights and opportunities, but there's still a lot of tension, and a lot of them still do identify as Palestinians and do not necessarily see themselves as patriotic Israelis.
Because the problem is, Warren, even if you enjoy full and equal rights, that could be cumbersome, right? Because it may actually be worse for some people, because what it means is that you now have to work really hard and make something out of your life.
You don't have an excuse anymore.
Exactly. So those crybabies, which are not all of the Arab Israelis, but a big chunk of them, those crybabies, those bumps, as they say in Big Lebowski, they rather riot and go to violence than work and make life.
Not just, I think crybabies is minimizing it. Like, I think I agree that is the outlook in life, but it's a product of education, meaning they are raised by parents who believe that their nationality is of utmost importance. Their honor as Palestinians needs to be redeemed. And that's, I think, what leads to these kind of
when you describe
conflicts.
What life is like in the Arab world or in Gaza or in the PA and the Palestinian controlled communities on the West Bank, and you see how good life is for them, do they not see that if the government of Israel went away and Arabs took control and the Jews left, do they not see what would happen?
They do, but I don't think that I think it's a misunderstanding of the left and of the Westerners in general to understand the Arab mindset and the incentive structure, and culture, basically.
I mean, I
Arabs
guess
don't put... generally, again, Arab is a very broad term, but let's speak... generally, it's true, I think, to most of the Arab cultures in the Middle East, but let's speak specifically to the Palestinian culture here in Israel, or at least the Palestinian culture that's been created in the last 70 years. They do not place prosperity and life at the top of their value hierarchy.
They came from nothing. People don't realize, again, they were living, like, look at Bedouins 100 years ago.
Right.
They were living, like guys, did you see Dune? If you saw Dune, the movie Dune, and you saw
D-U-N-E, Dune, yes.
Dune, yeah, and you saw the Fremen, that's how the Arabs were living and are living in most parts of the Arab. Like, you just don't understand how they lived. So they came from nothing. So what's prosperity? Like, worst case scenario, they'll go back to how they lived.
You could say they feel now they see prosperity and they have everything to lose, but I think it's, again, a miscalculation of the way your average Muhammad, right? Your average Muhammad thinks, and it's not to this isn't racist. It doesn't have anything to do with their race or anything about their skin color or who they were,
or their religion,
or who birthed them, or their religion. Well, it does have to do a little bit with their religion, because religion is kind of, culture is downstream from religion, or religion is downstream from culture. But either way, it has to do with their culture. It has to do with the way they think and their value structure, and the value structure that they pass on to their children. And this is the key, that in Arab culture, one of the most important things is honor. Right, there's a lot of honor killings in Arab culture where, someone from the family, kind of Romeo Juliet's kind of style story, right? And the violence is unheard of. But generally speaking, honor is a very, very important thing in Arab culture, and that's why all of the prosperity in the world doesn't mean anything to them if their national identity has been taken away. They still need to redeem that.
Let me give you an example. Let's look at the more progressive Arab Palestinians, right? The Israeli citizens. I'm not even talking about what's going on in Judea, Samaria, and Gaza. Here in Israel, every year, numerous times, like dozens of times at least, if not hundreds, you have stories of women who, let's say a woman who got married to someone, and she's not happy. She wants out of the marriage. Her husband joins power with her brothers to murder her. Okay? So, and with the brothers of the bride and the husband murder her for wanting out. They'd rather her be dead than out. And that's before I'm talking about transsexuals, who are who need to flee.
Homosexual,
transsexual, who need to flee to asylums. And so that's just, and you can Google those things very easily.
You mentioned Eytan mentioned intersectionality before, and it's this weird problem where here in America there's all this push for LGBTQIA plus rights, and then at the same time Israel, as I see it, is the place where you live is very friendly to women's rights, gay rights, transgender rights, etc. And the Arab world is very, very hostile to women's. I'm sure there's exceptions to this. Maybe Dubai. I don't know, but they're very hostile to women's rights. It's very hostile. I don't know.
Even Dubai.
I'm just saying that generally speaking, in the
Dubai,
Arab world,
two men cannot go hand in hand in the street.
Okay, so that I'm just saying that. In the Arab world, they're not friends. So the intersectionality has this problem. They supposedly care about LGBTQIA plus rights, but all of a sudden, when it comes to Israel versus the Palestinians, they choose the people who are anti-LGBT rights against the people who are pro-LGBT rights because it's the power structure. It's this fundamentally incoherent philosophy that they operate under, this Marxist philosophy. And the reason I brought up genocide before is there's this tendency in the radical left to just change the meaning of words so that the words have no meaning anymore. It's right out of George Orwell. I don't know if you've read 1984, but it's like you start twisting the meaning of words. Yes. Yeah. So
there's a great meme regarding exactly what you just said. We shared it on our Instagram a little while ago. I don't know who actually made it, but it's hilarious. And it's a bunch of intersectional, gay pride, LGBTQ, holding a gay pride flag and also holding like a free Palestine flag. And then underneath it, you see a bunch of chickens holding a, support KFC flag, which is exactly that. It's like, I mean, you're rooting for the side that would kill you.
The flag says gays for Palestine and the chicken says chickens for KFC.
Yeah.
Okay. That's hilarious.
Yeah. But Warren, before we move on, I just wanted to go back to the original question, which I feel like we didn't really address, about us stealing the land.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We got to emphasize this. So the land, let's define the land, because this is also disputable. So let's say the land is from the Jordan River to the east, and the sea, the Mediterranean, to the west. Okay?
From the river to the sea.
Land. From the river to the sea. Let's say that's the land.
Yeah.
That land was occupied by dozens of nations, as you said, for 2,000 years. Before that, the Hebrews ruled here, but never mind. Anyway, Turks, few hundred years, then the British, 1917. Then British got a mandate from the UN to rule, and their mandate essentially was to eventually lead to a Jewish state. And also, like, if you look at the UN's, right, if I'm not mistaken, if you look at the UN's original mandate to the Brits for Palestine, you will see that the purpose is to eventually have a Jewish state there. And also, of course, the Balfour Declaration, where the king essentially says that he sees with a good intent, with a good eye, the establishment of a Jewish state. So that was the purpose of the mandate. That was the mandate was bad for Jews, for Arabs, mainly for the Jews. It's important to say that the Brits prevented Jews to come here, and those Jews who couldn't come here died in the Holocaust. Okay, so the British have Jewish blood on their hands in a plenty. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, they fled in 48. They literally fled because we terrorized them out of here.
47, no?
In 47. No, in 48.
No, in 47 they left, no?
Is this what they call the Nakba?
Don't gaslight me, sir.
Yeah, 48.
Is this what they call the Nakba? Is this what they refer to as the Nakba?
Not yet. Not yet.
No.
So 47 was the vote in the UN.
UN partition plan.
Where the UN suggested a plan where we got the worst parts of the land as we defined it before. We got like the desert, and that's it more or less. And the Arab/Palestinians got the best parts of the land, and we agreed to that. Although it was shitty for us, we accepted it because we said, you know what? Let's take what we can, cut our losses, and finally have a state. And the Arabs rejected the plan, and then the British fled. And what happened?
No, first the Arabs rejected, and then they attacked.
Essentially, the war. This also needs to be clarified. You can divide the war to two, and we fought two enemies. Enemy number one is the Palestinians/Arabs here in the land, who didn't have a country. Okay, they were under the British occupation. They fought us. Okay, that's legitimate. We're both fighting for this land. Okay, they started, but we went on a fight. But all the countries, sovereign countries, are neighbor countries, which did not have a conflict with us. Right. We didn't declare war on them. We didn't provoke them. They, on that day, declared war on us without provocation.
Right.
Okay, that's Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq.
Yeah.
Okay, so they declared war and they joined parts with the Palestinians. Yeah. And then a war broke. So when the war broke and we didn't start a war, it's a war. So what happened is we didn't steal the land. We conquered
the
land.
You won the war.
We conquered the land, and we're not ashamed of it. We conquered it.
Yeah, but that's also geopolitically. Another thing that's important to mention is that leading up to 1948, Jews, there was the Zionist movement, and Jews bought a large portion of the land. They started purchasing up parts of the land and building a settlement here.
It wasn't a large
and
portion.
None of that. It was a portion. It was a few percentages, but it was the most. It was areas that are at the center of life in Israel today.
Yeah.
So I mean, in all intents and purposes, it wasn't the middle.
It was like 10%.
They didn't buy the middle of nowhere, but no one cared about the middle of nowhere.
But they bought it legally.
They bought legally the land, and they built up a settlement. And none of the land was stolen at any point. There was no point where Jews ran onto Arab land outside of the context of a war, where Jewish civilians or citizens ran onto Arab land and said, "This is my land, get out of here," or I don't know, raided a house and kicked the people out.
Right.
There was either Jews buying land in the state of Israel and building a settlement, or Jews at war with the Arab nations and the Arab population in the land, leading a war, winning the war, and then settling the conquered lands.
And just to finish the story, in 1967, again, a war broke, again unprovoked by us, again, and up until 1967, Judea and Samaria was Jordanian territory, and also Eastern Jerusalem, and the people there had Jordanian citizenship, and Jordan started a war against us, so we fought back. We conquered that land from Jordan, and
not from the Palestinians, but from Jordan. Got it.
No, and thus we hold it up until today.
So let me turn the topic to something different, which is my frustration when I have these conversations with people who support the so-called Palestinians. Is I don't feel like that there's there's dispute within Israel. There are people who feel like Israel's doing too much. They want to be accommodative to the Palestinians. What I don't understand is, does anybody have a solution that accommodates what the Palestinians say they want and doesn't mean the end of the state of Israel and all the Jews leave? Is there some kind of proposal out there that the Arabs would? In other words, my take on it is, if you did some kind of step where you gave some land, quote, back, even though it's not really back, if you gave them some land, if you gave them some control over more land, it wouldn't stop. They wouldn't stop trying to take over the rest of Israel. Am I mistaken, or is there some people who believe that there's some sort of way of resolving this, a two-state solution, whatever, that the Arabs would accept?
I'll do the short answer, and Eytan will do the long answer. So the short answer to your question is no, and Eytan can do the long question.
I think the long answer is we did it already, and it didn't work. I mean, that's the long answer. So,
but to go deeper, but the main thing is, you ask, is there an offer we can make that they can accept that don't mean that we will all be dead or out of this land? The answer is no, because the vast majority of the Palestinians, and this has been polled again and again, they want what is called the right of return. This is non-negotiable for them. And what that means is that all the millions of Arabs who are not Israeli citizens will come back inside the borders of Israel, get citizenship, and become the majority.
Right.
Thus, what that means is that we are all either
We're talking
dead,
something upwards of 5-6 million people.
And to be clear, the right of return is a bit of a fiction because a lot of them weren't there in the first place. A lot of them came from Jordan. They came from other Arab countries, and they claim a right of return.
Not only they weren't there in the first place, what the definition of a Palestinian refugee, according to the UN, is a unique definition reserved only for the Palestinian people. Meaning a refugee, according to the UN, is someone displaced by conflict or, right, for whatever reason, forcefully displaced from their homeland. A Palestinian refugee is someone forcefully displaced from their homeland, or any descendant of that person.
To eternity.
To eternity. There's no limit. So their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, basically in 100 years, there will be about 1 billion Palestinian refugees.
Right, but also,
you know how all of us have 1% Genghis Khan gene.
Yeah.
So
but if you go with Yasser Arafat, Arafat was Egyptian, Tunisian, whatever. He wasn't from the land. He wasn't from there. So how can he claim to be a refugee from land that
he did 23andMe, obviously.
Right.
20. Yeah.
Do 23andMe. 23andMe is a genetic test. Actually, one other question I wanted to ask you is I have the impression that we talk about racism, that Jews are racist against Arabs or Arabs are racist against. Aren't we really genetically largely the same people? We're all descended from Abraham. Am I roughly correct?
There's a theory that some of the Palestinian people that remained here in the land are like the Jews that remained from the kingdoms of
the lost tribe. They're like a lost tribe.
Israel and Judea. No, the non-lost tribe, meaning they're the ones that just stayed put and then they got converted by the Muslims. But I don't think I don't know if there's anything to back it up. Yeah.
Is there is there genetic testing that shows that we're largely the same? I mean, the reality is most humans are the same people. You could look. You take the DNA of a Chinese person, you take the DNA of a African person, and then you compare it to a monkey, right? The DNA of the Chinese person and the African person are almost identical by comparison to the monkey.
Yeah,
we're all the same people.
Special? But isn't that what's special about humans? Because genetically we might be very, 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 very close or almost identical, but we're worlds apart. Yeah. And that's really what matters, is that I don't see the world in the same way that an Arab sees the world, or the same way that a Chinese person sees the world, generally speaking. A Westerner sees it very different than,
But I mean, but you can be genetically nearly identical, and yet at the same time culturally very different because you were raised differently. It's what
exactly.
But I just have that sense, like when I encounter. I mean, even like the language, Shalom Aleichem, and then Aleichem Salam Aleichem. It's like the languages are fairly close to each other in some ways.
Yeah, but they stole the language from us, basically.
Of course.
No, but seriously though,
you should have a right of return. You should have a right of return. You should be able to take the language away from them and absorb it in Israel.
Yeah. No, look, it's like in Europe, Romanian and Italian and French are all cousins, are all descendants from Latin, right? And you can really hear similarities. It's like 30%. Italian and Romanian are like 30%, like the same thing. But Hebrew, you have traces for Hebrew for at least now they just found this piece of stone with the most ancient Hebrew inscription ever to be found. It goes back like
12th century BC or something.
Yeah.
Right?
Like
3,200 years or something.
So and Arabic does not have that depth. So it obviously evolved from Hebrew.
So I want to go back to this question of if there's, first of all, I agree with Eytan that there's no solution, there's no problem to be solved. But within the Israeli political scene, there are groups. I mean, I think there's Haaretz, and then there's Jerusalem Post. There's different newspapers within Israel, and some of them are just, staunchly pro-Israel, and some of them seem to want to accommodate. Is there, it's kind of like what you said, it's like chickens for KFC. It seems like there's a group of Jews there's a group of Jews in Israel who support somehow being accommodative to people who want to kill them. Is that?
But that's, we've always yeah.
That's inherently
Jewish.
Like, right. People don't know that the fascist party had in Italy had very prominent Jewish members right until the end.
Right.
So that's just an example, but.
Yeah, I think though in Israel, if you break it down, a quick breakdown of the political map in Israel, I'm not sure that there are too many people that really believe in a two-state solution anymore. You have parties on the far left that are like Meretz and the Avodah. Really, the Labor Party was sort of center left until recently, but recently it really has gone quite far left. And perhaps they represent what right now, like 12, 13, 15 seats in the government. So they perhaps
in the parliament, not in the government.
In the parliament, and they're in the coalition currently. Yeah,
just some of them. Yeah, not all.
But they perhaps support a two-state solution. But other than that, I don't think that any. And then of course you have the Arab parties. That some of which again are also in the coalition, most are sitting in the opposition, which is again what, like 14 seats.
I thought you were talking about the Arab parties. Sorry, yeah, the Arab parties, seats? Yeah, something.
14
like that.
Seats. So you have the Arab parties and then the extreme left, which make up like 30 seats. But again, the Arab parties aren't Jews. And then the rest of the political map in Israel, which includes the center left, the center, the right, and the extreme right, do not, I don't think, support a two-state solution.
No. The center left supports it. Of course they do.
What center left is there?
Avodah Party.
No, so I'm saying you weren't listening before. You were distracted.
He's saying the Avodah is no longer center left.
They went a little farther left.
So what center? Lapid?
Yeah. Center left.
I think Lapid would say he supports the two-stage solution still. Yes, he would support it.
So he hasn't vocally expressed.
No, I think it's in there. I think it's in his.
In his platform.
I think, yeah.
But the two-state solution would be that the Palestinians get a state on the West Bank. If I have this right, on the other side of the Jordan River, there's some decision about what land goes to which state.
Not on the other side of the Jordan River. Basically, on this side of the Jordan River, there's the West Bank, which is Judea and Samaria. It's the 1947 lines, which basically,
67. 67, not 47. You said 47.
No, 1967. So the lines in 1967, after 67.
Yeah.
Or the lines from...
The line is 1967.
Okay, so the 1967 lines, basically, to go back to the lines that are pre the Six-Day War, and to establish a state in the West Bank, which is, again, the west side of the Jordan River.
But I think you agree with me that if that solution were pursued, then the day after the Palestinian state was created, they would declare war on Israel, or even if not overtly, eventually... They would continue to support terrorist activities against the state of Israel, and eventually there would be another war, which they would lose.
It's inevitable.
And I wonder from the perspective of the Palestinians, it's kind of like, well, we keep getting the shit kicked out of us, but let's keep fighting. At what point do you say, this getting the shit kicked out of us really kind of sucks. Maybe we should try to find a way of doing this that doesn't involve us getting the shit kicked out of us. And like I think what you're saying is honor's more important to them than not getting the shit kicked out of them. And then you have the radical left in Europe and the United States and other places saying, oh, the poor Palestinians are victims, let's give them money, which ends up going to the leaders of their movement, who end up screwing over their own people.
In their Swiss bank accounts.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but I think the left here in Israel is less about the center left and even the left, and maybe excluding the far extreme left. I think the most of the left is more about appeasement. I don't think they actually have desires to, suicidal wishes. I don't think they're just trying to. They're trying to feed the beast, and they think that if we give them land, then it'll solve some kind of problem. But it's completely oblivious.
And last point, which on that argument, is that the Palestinians themselves are divided, deeply divided between Hamas and the PA, and those are two political. It's like two different peoples by now. So Gaza and the PA in Judea and Samaria will never be one country. They hate each other more than they. It's hard to fathom this, but they hate each other more than they hate us. So they will never survive in one state. So we're now talking about the three-state solution, basically.
Yeah,
I always a Hamas state, a PA state, and a Jewish state.
I always joke actually similarly that Jews make the best anti-Semites because we're much better at hating each other than the other side don't have good reasons to hate us. They have like bad reasons. We have good reasons. Like the Orthodox hate the Reform, and the Reform hate the Orthodox, and this group hates that. People think that just like people think Arabs might be uniform or the Palestinians might be uniform, Jews aren't really uniform. We have a lot of this Chabad, Lubavitch, whatever. There's groups of Jews that a lot of us think, oh, those people, they're crazy, right? And that's something that that nobody's aware of. So you guys told me you wanted to go about an hour. We're pushing about an hour right now. Is there anything else that you feel like an American audience might? Because most of my audience is American. Is there anything else you feel like an American audience might not appreciate about the situation that I haven't mentioned or we haven't talked about that should be something they should understand?
I would say, to continue the last point, that it is clear to most Jews who live here, okay, that there will never be, let's see, not in our lifetime, there won't be a Palestinian state. So that it will not happen, guys. It will not happen. Right. So we might as well get it off the table, unless like they suddenly see the light. And like Jesus, born again, it's just not an option.
Right. Well,
let's get it off the table.
Right.
Because we're not suicidal.
But does that mean going forward that the situation is just the situation outside of Israel, immediately outside of Israel, does that just mean the situation is just going to continue to fester? That the Palestinians living in Gaza are going to continue to suffer, that the Palestinians living in Palestinian-controlled territory are going to continue to suffer. I really feel like one of the things we talked about earlier...
No? Yeah, sorry.
I really feel like if we're going to say there's a Palestinian people, they're kind of oppressed wherever they go by their own people, by the Arab world.
Exactly. But by their immediate leaders.
Right, and not even just in Gaza, but also in, say, if they're in Saudi Arabia, working in Saudi Arabia, they're oppressed there. In Jordan, they're oppressed. In Lebanon, they're oppressed.
Yes.
And what's striking about it is that if the people who care about the Palestinian people genuinely cared about them, they wouldn't just care about Israel. They would care about how they're treated in Lebanon. They would care about how they're treated in Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, wherever you want to talk about. And that never gets talked about. The Saudis are powerful. The people in Dubai are powerful. Maybe the Lebanese government isn't powerful, but the Saudis are powerful. Why is it never talked about how the Saudis oppress?
I don't think there are lots of Palestinians in Saudi Arabia. They're mostly in Jordan, Lebanon. Those are like the big chunks, and Syria.
But okay, so why isn't it talked about? Why aren't people saying, why did the Jordanians oppress the Palestinians? And I think the sense might be, well, the poor Palestinians have to live in refugee camps in Jordan because of what Israel has done, and that's not really true. That the Palestinians were living in Jordan before, and were not living well before Israel was created.
Who knows by now? It's all It's all a messy thing. But even if they are, even if all the Palestinians in Jordan, for the sake of the argument, until 48 they lived in, right? Let's say, for the sake of the argument, that they lived here, and in the war we kicked them all out. Yeah. Well, that's done. They will never come back. So now they live in a sovereign state. So it's up to Jordan to figure it out. And if they want better lives, well, they need to revolutionize the situation in Jordan and take control of.
But the point I'm making is that the radical left doesn't hold the Jordanian government accountable. They don't hold
They
the
don't
Lebanese
know.
government
They're
accountable.
just ignorant. If you asked AOC how many Palestinians live in Jordan, she wouldn't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Nobody knows this, although it's in Wikipedia. It's ignorance by choice.
Okay. All right, so we're over an hour, and I think you guys wanted to cut out at an hour. Anything else that you want to say before? And just really quick, I'll just say this: your channel is Two Nice Jewish Boys. You have a podcast that they can find on Spotify and other platforms. Yep. You have a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
You have a YouTube channel. Is there any? And you're on it. You have an Instagram. Is there anywhere else that they can find you?
We're a website.
On Facebook. We have a website. We're basically everywhere. Just search Two Nice Jewish Boys in Google and you'll find us.
Okay. And
I think I'll sign off by saying that that it seems to me that if you have any brain cells left, if you read a little bit about the situation, maybe that's a bit harsh. I don't want to offend anybody, but honestly, zoom out for a second. Look at what's going on in Israel. Look at the culture that's flourishing here. Look at the rights that people enjoy. Look at the lives that they're creating. And then take a look at Gaza. Gaza has, again, you can blame it on the siege that Israel is, or the blockade that Israel has implemented, and it's not letting. But Israel lets in food and safe trade through into Gaza that just make sure that weapons aren't actually sent in. So look at Gaza. Gaza is a completely closed off section of land that's inhabited by Palestinians since 2005. And what have they made of it? So just look at those two sides and ask yourself, you can, because the history you can go way back. You can just keep going back and back and back and ask yourself, where did it all start? But look right now at the two cultures and ask yourself, what do you think is the right side of history? The side that promotes, freedom of speech and freedom of religion and has equal rights for men, women, and people of all sexes and races and ethnicities, or the side that, kills gay people and suppresses women?
Yep. Okay.
It's pretty simple.
So I'll put links in the video description on my locals platform, The Daily Lie, and I'll probably do something on Twitter and something on YouTube to promote this video. See if we get some people to watch it.
People are invited to hit us up and email us if they want to comment about the conversations.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely. We love getting mail.
Okay.
We love it.
So now, Eytan Eytan and then Naor, I want to thank you both very much for coming on. I'm gonna stop the recording.
Thank you, Warren.